Hello and welcome to another episode of the Teachers of BC podcast. Real stories, real teachers, real life. Season 2. My name is Sabrina Hartman, and today Taylor Photo will be interviewing Tanya Kerr. Tanya is a local president in BC who represents teachers. I hope that today you are inspired by our conversation around teacher mental health while teaching during the COVID-19 global pandemic. Please grab a cup of coffee, relax in your seat, or if you're driving in your car, turn it up. Welcome, Tanya.
Okay, hello there, Tanya. How are you?
Hi, Taylor. I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. So we have some questions for you today, just to sort of get a sense of how things have been going this year. And again, our focus is going to be on teaching during the pandemic. But we want to start with you first. How long have you been a teacher?
I have been teaching since 2008.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And what subjects and areas have you done most of your teaching in?
I have a degree in chemistry, so mostly in junior science and chemistry, but I have also done some math and a lot of TOCing, so 6 years of teaching on call. And I also have my diploma in special education, so I've also done some work in resource.
Okay, it's interesting, the 6 years of TTOCing. I feel like a lot of teachers in the past 5 years really have almost no TTOCing because they get hired right away. What do you think about the time you spent TTOCing, and was it helpful, and what did you learn during that time?
When I was hired on, it was pretty much the last year before teachers could barely even get hired onto a TTOC list. So we were not in a teacher shortage, but this was before the language was restored. I was scrambling to try and get 4 days a week of work. And at that point, we were also not getting paid on scale. So if you didn't get your at least 4 days, consecutive days, then you were actually getting paid at a lower rate. So there was that aspect of it. But I did learn a lot from teaching on call. I learned which schools I liked. Some staff were more welcoming than others as a teacher teaching on call, but you know that it's different when you're a member of that staff. And I would, take notes of the lessons that I liked. I would, borrow notes and photocopy things and get all sorts of different ideas teaching on call. I could practice new strategies, and if it didn't work one day, well, then I changed it up for the next time. So I learned a lot teaching on call. Part of that time, I was also a job share, so I did have my own classroom. And your classroom management strategies are very different if they're your own students or if you're teaching on call.
Right. Yeah. And that aspect of sharing the space and navigating into professionals' lives as a TTOC, I only spent a number of weeks, so it was quick learning, so to speak. You said your degree's in chemistry?
Yes.
Where did you go to school, university?
I was the last graduating class of the University College of the Cariboo, now Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops.
Wow, that's kind of a cool tidbit. The last graduating class.
Yeah.
Nice. And what was your experience like there?
My largest class was first year biology. There was 60 students in the class. Mm-hmm. So very different than for those that went to UBC or SFU. By the time I was in fourth year, there might have been 7 students in a class. We would go to the pubs with our instructors. So there was a lot of close relationships there. Mm-hmm. And I really felt like it was, a nice personal experience.
Nice. My next question is, and hopefully, and maybe you can speak to some experience you had there or in your public school education, but what made you decide to go into teaching in your life?
It was never my intention. I was actually going to be a veterinarian, but even vet school was going to be a lot of extra work. And so I started on my degree in chemistry, really liked working in the lab. And when I finished with my degree, I started working as a chemist, and I enjoyed the work, but the pay was very low, and I was able to move from an analyst 1 to an analyst 3 in 6 months time, and then there wasn't really anywhere to go from that point unless I went into management. I really liked training a lot of our co-op students, and that's what made me decide to go into teaching. I've been involved in Girl Guides since I was 6 years old, so I liked working with kids as well. And yeah, it was one extra year to become a teacher, and I thought I'd give it a try.
Nice. You hear a lot of teachers who have an exposure to some form of mentoring or teaching. At some point, they were on a different path. Super interesting, veterinarian or vet school. But they're on a different path, and then they get exposed to what it might be like to be a teacher in that experience. So we kind of want to get into this year. What a crazy year it's been in the world of teaching. In your role as a local president, I can imagine the amount of questions, the amount of concerns, the overall feeling from teachers out there has been a lot to take in. Can you just maybe speak to the overall feeling of some of the teachers you've had to talk to this year?
That's a big question. It feels like it's been a long year.
Yeah.
And I think people are struggling for sure. I mean, teaching is a stressful profession, even in a good year. And so we're coming in with a lot of other outside pressures.
Mm-hmm.
And even the littlest thing, a principal says something that the teacher doesn't agree with, or, there's they want to take a day off, whatever it might be, it just becomes such a big issue. And teachers are at the point where, I think I might just quit. That's a lot of the response that I get.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, that word, or that phrase, I guess, or sentence, I want to quit. You just never want to hear that, as far as the growth mindset approach that a lot of classrooms and teachers are trying to remind their students of. But when it gets to the point like you're talking about, where, the pressures of everything, and then the COVID-19 pandemic on top of that, it really does seem like everyone is sort of on that paper thin boundary line. Can you think of some conversations maybe, or just like, again, speak to what you're hearing about, maybe examples in classrooms that teachers are concerned about?
So the teaching itself, we don't hear as much about that aspect. We definitely deal a lot more with collective agreement language, the leaves that people want. We do hear about, violent incidents, not as much this year. So I'm trying to think of examples where, teachers have come to us with concerns in their classrooms. I mean, mask wearing is one
Right.
of them.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and health and safety guidelines is confusing for a lot of us, because it seems like the guidelines are changing, or they don't apply to schools, and what you hear on the news or in different districts isn't the same always in Langley.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's I think been more of the challenge, is getting consistent information out to our members.
Right. I know a lot of people have had the concerns about some of the notifications, and staff are concerned about like who gets notified and when they get notified. And I know that's been an ongoing sort of dialogue between the district and the union, and then also the health authorities. Where are we at on that? And with the vaccines being rolled out, I think like hopefully the health and safety things will remain in place, and Yeah. So what do you think? How much progress have we made, and is there still progress to be made on the health and safety guidelines?
I feel like the health and safety guidelines, they're starting to get better and a little bit more clear. Hopefully they do keep a lot of the guidelines in place, but I know that some of that will come with funding. Like, for example, in elementary schools, having a daytime custodian, there wasn't funding for that before. A lot of that funding had been eroded over the years, and hopefully they find a way that they can actually maintain that, because it's important, even when we're not in times of COVID.
Yeah.
So, there's some of those aspects. As far as the notifications are concerned, I feel like it's actually taken a step back, and we're not necessarily being notified about exposures or isolation. And I don't know if that's coming more from the district or if that's a Fraser Health issue. We're still talking with both, and we're still requesting that information. But it's very different in this part of the world than where my brother lives in New Zealand.
Right.
They have apps on their phone, and every time they go somewhere, they have to actually scan when they enter and scan when they leave. So the contact tracing is just that much better, and really there isn't the same privacy.
Right.
So when there was an exposure in his town in New Plymouth, they could actually track almost hour per hour where this person had gone, and they could get that information out. So it's so different than what we're seeing here.
Yeah, that does sound like it's a lot more efficient just in tracking the coming and goings of people. Yeah, there's lots of questions I could keep going on the health and safety stuff. But I kind of want to shift gears and think this year, maybe you personally, or in just talking to teachers out there, what examples have you seen where people have sort of taken the glass half full approach, or you've seen something be really successful despite the pandemic and despite some of the restrictions and pressures placed on teachers?
There's some teachers that were able to shift, I would say secondary more so than elementary, but shift into the online teaching. And that, I mean, it wasn't necessarily what they would want to do. Everyone would like to be in front of students, but they were able to do it and do it successfully. And then returning to the classroom, again, we see it more with secondary than elementary. And part of that is just, what you can actually do with the kids. But some of the secondary people have kept up with a lot of their online learning or online posting of assignments and lessons and things like that. So I think that's been successful. But, part of the challenge for us, and yes, sorry, this is going back to health and safety.
Yeah, that's okay.
Is our goal for the LTA is to do school visits twice a year to every school. And with the pandemic, we haven't done that. So I haven't seen this in action. And it's a struggle because I want to be in schools. I want to see what's happening, but I also am trying to respect, cohorts and the health and safety, and so we can be available virtually, but I don't get to experience what other teachers are experiencing.
And even it's taken some time to get used to doing some of the meeting times virtually, I think. I know it's not the same. You can't get the same feel like you were speaking to, Tanya, but like if you're actually able to go into someone's classroom and be there to, be a part of the action and the dynamics that happen, especially for elementary schools, where it's a little more fluid all the time. You don't get that same feeling if you're just joining on a computer and zooming into what's going on or teamsing into what's going on. But I agree. I think a lot of staff have, taken the challenge on themselves, to adapt to teaching online and uploading things. I think that's been a real positive thing.